Let's take the parsha with us. One of the stories that really touched my neshama years ago was I read in the Rav Shlomo book from Shlomo Freifeld how one of his talmidim once lied to him. I think he asked him where he was for Shachris and he made up some excuse and Rav Shlomo didn't say anything. It went by a very long time, maybe a year, 2 years, and this talmid grew, he developed, he evolved into a ben Torah. And then once they were walking down, maybe it was in camp, down a road, and then suddenly Reb Shlomo turns to him and he says, "That's how you speak to the Rosh Yeshiva? You lie to him like that? You tell him that you told me that whatever his excuse was." It took a few seconds until this Talmud even remembered what he was talking about. And he asked Reb Shlomo, he said, "Rosh Yeshiva, why did you wait so many years to tell me this?" And he said, "Then you had no ears. By now you've grown ears." It takes a very long time in every person's life until you develop to the extent that you grow ears. And it's only after you grow ears that you could head, you could hear things and you could be ready to take things in. Last week we spoke about the process of how the Torah guides us and how to live Gewalt lives. And we spoke about how Noach is the first message in the world is that you threaten people and you say, look, if you're not going to be good, there's going to come a flood and it's going to wipe you out. But then that obviously doesn't work. So then there's a model called Chesed, that's Avram Avinu. Everybody knows that the Zohar HaKadosh correlates Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov to Chesed, Gevura, and Teferes. So you have Avram Avinu, and he represents Chesed, and he's trying out a new way of connecting to Hashem. He becomes Av Hamoin Goyim with his method. He goes around the world teaching the world Hashem Echad, and he does it with Eshel, Achilish Dialina. He brings people in. We spoke about the Medrash of how we invited everybody in, and he talks about what matters. On the other hand, there was an issue with it, that there was a nefesh asher asa b'charoin, all the neshamas, all the people that he brought from charoin af, from a place of anger, nobody stays. They fall away. Because peace and love without structure doesn't work. So then comes Yitzchak. And we spoke about last week how the Baal Shem Tov teaches, Avram hoiled as Yitzchak, Chesed must give birth to Gevura. And without Gevura there can't be any Chesed, and Yitzchak is the one who's constantly fighting to redig the be'eros. It gets stuffed up, and he's a fighter. He doesn't have any major revelations from Hashem, and he's the model of Gevura. And then we all know that the next stage is Teferes. And Yaakov is Titain Emes LeYaakov. Emes is the Kav HaEmtzoi. That's Teferes. That's where there's beauty. It's when the Chesed and the Gevura merge. So, for example, let's say I would take this cup. So let's assume that inside the liquid would be Chesed. It's Hashpah. The glass is Gevura. The glass is the boundaries. If the glass cracks, so then I have a mess. If I have just the glass without anything to pour into it, so then it just takes up space. It's like it's worth 5 cents. A bottle is worth 5 cents in recycling. When you have both of them together, then you say, pshh, then we have Teferes, then it's beauty. And when you go into the journey of the Parshas, you realize how it's taking you on your personal journey of how you can live a life of Teferes. But you have to know it's a very difficult process. Teferes is not something which comes easy. There's a lot of Parshas dedicated to the story of Yaakov because it's a long, difficult process. And the story of Teferes begins, how there's 2 children who are born. Shnei goyim bevitnech. There are 2 children who are going to be born. Yitzchak, he loves Esav, and we all know that Esav comes from the lashon of asiya, asi, to do. Yaakov, he's the ishtam yoshevei halam. Only Rivka loves him. He was given a name Yaakov. The name Yaakov comes from Akev, from a heel. A heel is like something that's crooked. It's something that's Yakveni. Like Esav later complains, Yakveni, he went around me. He was shrewd, he was conniving, he manipulated me. Twice he manipulated me. He manipulated me once on the Bechorah, manipulated me once on the Brachas. And you wonder, I don't get it. Didn't you just tell me that Yaakov is an ish tam? He's not manipulative, and he's not conniving, and he's not shrewd. He's an ish tam, he's an ish cholak, he's smooth. What's happening over here? So the Chassidish Svarim talk about, the Polish Svarim talk about how just like there was 3 avos, but then you come across that there's 4 imahos. And they talk about this idea that there was really supposed to be 4 avos. What were the 4 avos? And the answer is that really Esav was supposed to be one of the avos. It should have been Elokei Avram, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov, Elokei Esav. Or maybe Elokei Esav, Elokei Yaakov. And in reality, Esav was supposed to marry Leah, because Esav represented a certain module in the Bria. He was the Ish Sada. He was going to go out into the world. He was going to conquer the Olam Asiyah, and he's going to find God in that world. But for some reason it doesn't work out that way. And it seems that Esav, his intentions in being in Olam Asiyah is not for the ultimate intention, and therefore Yaakov has to take the place of Esav. So Yaakov goes from being an ish tam, ish cholak, somebody who's sitting in a besmedrash, he's learning Hashem ve'evin, and he's connected to Hashem, to have to go out into the world. So how does that take place? How does it happen? So everybody knows that his mother calls him in one nice day, and she says, this bracha is going to be given, and I think you have to go get the brachas. Why do you have to go get the brachas? Because you have to take over the job of Esav, and you have to go conquer the Bria, you have to conquer the world. Esav was a Bechor. We have to understand that a Bechor is a tremendously important concept in Yiddishkeit. In Yiddishkeit you have B'ni Bechor Yisrael, you have Yidna Kol Bechor, you have a Peter Chamoid, you have by Makas Bechoros, you have a lot of instances in the Torah we're busy with Bechor. What's so important about a Bechor? What does it mean that Esav was a Bechor? Why did Yaakov have to take the Bechor? And what does it mean he bought the Bechor? How can you buy it? It's like either you're the firstborn or you're not the firstborn. If you're the firstborn, then you're Bechor. And if you're not, then you're not. So what do you mean you bought it? What are you buying exactly? So if you're going back into ancient times, then you realize something very fascinating. Today, people write books. We have scrolls. That's the way how we transmit wisdom from one generation to the next. So let's say a person lived his life. He lived up on a field. It took him like 20, 30 years to figure out what to plant, when the tide comes up, when the cows come and then they eat everything up, how to deal with your neighbors, what's important values to live by, who are your gods or who is your God, how do you divide your estate up, what are the stuff you learned for 20, 30 years? How do you give that over to your children that they shouldn't have to reinvent the wheel over again? So the answer was that every family had a Bechor. And a Bechor was like a memutza. It was like a link of generations. He linked what the parents learned. He was part of the old generation, but he was also young enough to lead the new generation, so he had to transmit the values of the new generation. So whenever you come across the concept of Bechor, you'll see L'mushal when Hashem says, B'ni Bechor Yisrael, so you have the Egyptians, and then then Hashem says, the Jews, you're my Bechor. What does it mean, you're my Bechor? It means you're my people who carry the responsibility to give over the messages of my oneness and of my kindness and of my goodness, and the reason why we're here in the world. It's your destiny and it's your responsibility to transmit that to the universe. I need everyone to know what I'm giving over to you. When it says you're a light upon the nations, it doesn't mean you're better than the nations. It means you carry the responsibility to give over light to the nations. If you do that, then you'll be better than the nations, because you're carrying the achrayas, the responsibility of giving it over. So, what you have over here is that Yitzchak is Gevura. He has a Bechor. His Bechor is Esav. He wants Esav to transmit what he learned about the Bria, the importance of Gevura, the importance of never giving up, the importance that when the Be'edas get stuffed up, you keep on going, the importance that if you don't have revelations, you still have to do it. But Esav's not taking that responsibility. So Rivka comes to Yaakov and she says, you're going to have to transform yourself into a new type of a person. You're going to have to become the Bechor. And he buys it. Doesn't mean that that he's the older ones. It means he bought the responsibility of giving over, transmitting the message. And that's how you understand that when it comes the next generation, the next period of time, when he hears about the brachas, the blessings, suddenly Rivka realizes that Yaakov must get blessings, because these blessings are here for the people who are going to actually deal with the real world. But if you're taking over the real world, then you have to take it over all the way, and you need the blessings to take your side. So Yaakov Avinu goes over. We all know he does this whole spiel. And he says, Ani Esav b'cheirecha. And now Rashi struggles with it. What do you mean? He lied? And the answer is, he says, Ani Esav b'cheirecha. I am who I am. Esav b'cheirecha. But if you go in a little deeper, then it becomes very literal. He says, Ani Esav b'cheirecha. I am your b'chor Esav, because I am the one who is going to take over the responsibility of transmitting your message to the world. The problem then becomes that after the brachas are given over to Yaakov, Esav comes back in. And Esav cries. Esav cries, Vayeitzei Esav koile vayefk. Esav cries. And Chazal talk about that those tears had an impact on generations to come. If you look further on the psukim, you see, and this is something that I saw Rabbi David Foreman talks about, how you see these words, that Vayeitzei Esav koile vayefk, it says the same thing, just like Vayeitzei es koile vayefk, that Yaakov Avinu, when he saw Rachel, Vayeitzei es koile vayefk, it uses the same words. He also lifted up his eyes and he cried. And whenever it says in the Torah that somebody lifted up their eyes and they cried, it's like where it says by Hagar, that Hagar saw Yishmael. And then it says, Vatisa es koile vatev, she lifted up her voice and she cried. Why did she cry? She cried because she saw her son in an impossible situation of impending doom. She saw that her son is going to die. And whenever a person is facing something that he's definitely going to lose, then the person lifts up their eyes, their voice, and they cry. Those words in the Torah describe that scenario and that emotional context. So you have Esav crying. Why was he crying? Because he realized that not only the Bechorah, that the berachos were taken from him. And here you come into a very fascinating concept, where you see Yaakov being put into an impossible situation. He was born to be a Ishtam. He was a Ishtam. He didn't know of anything. The only way how he was able to get things that an Ishtam can't do was through Yaakov, through an Akev, through a roundabout way, through a conniving way. He had no other choice. And he did it. But when you do things that way, then you're creating an energy that is going to have to be dealt with. When Esav was supposed to get the brachas and he cried, those tears are remembered. Chazal tell us that Misha Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu Vatran, whoever says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, like he forgets, he's mevater, it says his innards should turn over. Yevatru b'nei meyav, something like that. That means Hashem doesn't forget anything. And then you see it repeating itself in the Torah again and again. You see that when he comes to Rachel, suddenly he lifts his eyes and cries. Why does he lift his eyes and cries? Because he sees that Rachel she's not going to be buried with him, and she sees how she's slipping away. And that's taka what happens. What happens? What happens is that the same thing that he did through the Yaakov method of doing things through an Akev comes back to bite him. Kaviyachol. So he comes to Beis Lavan. He ends up coming to Beis Lavan, and what happens to him in Beis Lavan? In Beis Lavan, he's suddenly confronted that he's having to work for 7 years for Rachel, the girl who he loves, his soulmate, his neshama. And at the end, suddenly somebody gets switched. And then he doesn't get what he was working for. And Lavan tells him that's not the way we do things over here. He says, we don't do things the way you did things back over there, where you through a conniving way, you just go take things that weren't really yours. It doesn't work that way. And he cried about that when he saw her. He was crying because if the method of how you got things were through Yaakov, so then you're going to have to deal with the backlash of it coming back to repeat itself in your life too. And that's the whole story of Yaakov. So now let's go back a little in time, and let's go back how Yaakov Avinu, Vayeitzei Yaakov mi Be'er Sheva vayelech Harana. After he takes the Bechorah, Rivka tells him to go out, skip town. Vayelech Harana, and all the Chassidish Svarim talk about it, Baal Shem Tov talks about it. Vayelech Harana means he went to a place of Charon Af. And what happens over there? Vayivga ba'makom. He comes to a space, and he has this dream. And in the dream, he says, Sulam mutzav ortza v'roishim agima shamaymo. V'hine melachi elikim oilim v'yardibo. He sees this vision of this ladder with heavenly angels going up and down. And you wonder, why do heavenly angels need ladders? Heavenly angels could go up and down on their own. They don't need ladders. So all the Svarim talk about that he was having a vision of the secret of the universe. Hashem was telling him, I want you to understand the way things are the way they're meant to be. And you should know that I'm going to be with you. But I want you to understand it's going to be a very long process for you to develop the way you were meant to be. And that process goes with a ladder. Ladders have rungs. I once saw this line, it said, the elevator to success is broken. Use the staircase instead. The elevator to success is always broken. We always try to find shortcuts, how we're going to be ma'akayiv. You're going to shrewdly, connivingly skip the system, skip the steps. And you might actually see success, but you should know in the end, that's not the way it works. You're going to have to learn how to go up the steps and transform yourself step by step to turn into a new type of a person. And Hashem says you should know, I was Ani Hashem Elokei Avraham Avicha Elokei Yitzchak. The land that you see is going to be yours. Ufaratzta yamav v'kedma v'tzafoyna v'negba v'nivrichu b'chol kol mishpachos adam v'zarecha. You're going to be v'hine onoichi imach. I'm going to be with you. And you say, wow, Hashem is saying I'm going to be with you. But He's saying I'm going to be with you to go up this ladder. And then if you go through the parsha, you say, Hashem said, I'm going to be with you. Where was He? Where was He when Rachel was switched out under him? Where was He then? I thought Hashem said, I'm going to be with you. No. I'm going to be with you through the process that you're going to turn into a new type of a person. I'm going to be with you when you're going to work for 7 years and you're going to go out of being a Yoshev Oil. You're going to go to Charana, to a place of Charon. You're going to learn how to work in Oil Masiyah. Not only that, you're coming from a place of Yaakov. You went like this. I'm going to put you into base Lavan. Lavan is Lavan Arami. Lavan is a fopper. He's conniving. He's a liar. I want you to see the other side of lying. I want you to live there. And I want you to discover how to be Ish Sada, living in the world with sheep, with business, with shrewdness, with lying, and how to become an Ish Yashar. If you follow through the parashas, you come to the point where after he leaves Beis Lavan, and he takes everything with him, and he uses all the techniques of how to be conniving and shrewd, and he gets all of the sheep with the Akudim, Nukudim, Ibrudim. He leaves with his both wives, with Shvatim, and he's leaving, he's on the way out, and Lavan runs after him, and he says, Lamo ganafta leoi. Why did you steal my gods? Why did you steal my gods? He took everything out. He even took away the gods of Lavan. He took out the whole spice, the whole energy from being a Lavan. He took everything with him. And then he makes with him a peace. He makes galed. And then you know what happens in the next parasha? He's going to meet up with Esav. That's when you go into the next parasha where he finally gets his confrontation and he reaches out to Esav. He hears that Esav is going to sending an army to get him. But Last time, when he was Yaakov, he ran away. When he was Yaakov, he went like this. But this time he said, no. He prepared himself, l'doiron, l'milchama, l'tfilah. He goes to meet him. He sends him presents. And eventually when they meet, he falls on him. They embrace again. He hugs him. He blesses him. He gives him bracha. He doesn't run away from the challenge. And right before that story, there's an amazing event that takes place. And that's when Yaakov meets up with this malach. He meets up with this malach. There's a tremendous struggle going on. And what does the malach do right before he goes back to heaven? He says, I have a new name for you. Your name is not Yaakov anymore. From now on, your name is Yisrael. Kisarisa lekim ve'anashe v'tuchal. Weil du hast dich gewältigt, because you struggled, because you mastered. He gave him a new name. And it was when he gave him that new name, that's when he actually became the embodiment of the Bechor and of the Esav and of the mission of being able to combine both the Ishtam Yoshev Halem together with bringing down that message into the world. But this time it wasn't. It was Yisrael is the word Yashar Keil, straight with Hashem. Let's you be straight. So many times we look negatively back on, we look negatively on people who do things like that. But in reality, in psychology, we know that any person who exhibits any type of negative behavior, there's a reason for it. And it usually was because when they were young, they didn't have the skills and the ability in order to deal with life in a straightforward fashion, because there was so much pain. So they had to come up with a way of how to deal with it a roundabout. That's why you have people who are cynical, or you have people who are closed up, you have people who are bullies. It's always a manifestation of something that went on in their life, and this was the only method of protection that they had. And that's okay. And Hashem tells every person, I want you to know, this is the way how we develop. And Kabbalah talks about how there's a shvira, the shvira sakelim, there's nitzoitzes, ariyah kodesh, there's nitzoitzes in the world. They have to be gathered, they have to be brought back. The parashas are describing the process, the long, difficult process that it takes till you grow ears. And Hashem says, Vayei imach, I'm going to be with you. But I'm going to be with you doesn't mean that you're not going to struggle. It means I'm going to be with you as you evolve from Yaakov to Yisro. I'm going to be with you as Chesed and Gevura combined to create a new Tiferes model. When I'm going to tell you, the pasuk in Yeshaya says, Koy Amar Hashem el Beis Yaakov. So says Hashem to the house of Yaakov, Asher Podo es Avram. Yaakov Asher Podo es Avram. Yaakov who redeemed Avram. Yaakov has a terribly difficult mission. He has to redeem Avram. He has to be Poide Avram. He has to be Poide Chesed. How are you Poide Chesed? By combining it with Gevura. But combining it with Gevura doesn't come on its own. It's something you have to schwitz for years. And part of the schwitzing process is that you're going to act according to the way you've been wired. It's going to get you to where you want, but not the right way. You're going to have to clean up this mess for years later. You have to, and in history this repeats itself. The story of Yaakov and Esav repeats itself again and again from the tears. You have it playing out in Megillas Esther. You have this long, it's on repeat the story. But every single cycle we get better, we improve, and we come closer to a place of Tiferes. Everyone has to know in their own life that whenever you look back at things you've done, you have to know that was the way it had to be, because you didn't know any way else. But you should also know that it's going to come with a backlash. And that backlash is to teach you and to guide you that you must find and evolve into a new way of being. And that's the reason why we're here. When it talks about all the svarim, you open up Avram is Chesed, Yitzchak is Gevura, Tiferes. We're not saying heebie-jeebie Kabbalistic language. We're trying to communicate to you the greatest secret of your life, because you're also either Chesed, Gevura, one of them, who has to struggle to incorporate new aspects in your life to create Tiferes. Everyone. If you're B'nai Yisrael. If you're from the B'nai Yisrael, then you're mission in life is to be a Isha Yisraeli, is to be someone who transforms from Yaakov to Yisrael. That's why we're here. And it happens in your life all the time. It's not a negative, it's just a necessary talich. It's a process that everyone has to go through. And that's why so many parshas are devoted to the story of Yaakov. Running away from Esav, getting stuck in Beis Lavan, getting ripped off, and having to learn how to fight with a malach. You know, the Chassidic masters taught, why does it say, why did he call him Yisrael? He should have called him, it says Vatuchal, he should have called him Tuchal. Ki serisa lekim va'anoshim Vatuchal. He should have called him Tuchal. And the answer is that serisa means that you mastered, that you struggled. The name that we get is that we're mitmoded, we're struggling. You know, we're taking the challenge. And many times it's inner challenges. It's inner challenges of fixing habits, fixing ways that bring you instant results, and throwing it away to take a long path that you don't see immediate results. You know, when Yaakov goes and he confronts Esav face to face, there's many reasons why people run away from problems. Because they just don't know how to deal with it. And you have to understand that meeting your brother head on could end up with a battle. You could lose. You have to confront the fact of what you've done in the past. You have to man up. You have to admit. You have to be machniya yourself. You have to make good. You have to rectify what you did. You have to make amends. There's a whole process that has to go through. When Yaakov met Esav, he was making amends on his thing. And here's the secret. The secret is that you would say, okay, so Yaakov did tshuva, right? He meets up with Esav. They hug each other. They kiss each other. So why is this story repeating itself again and again in Klal Yisrael? Because we're not telling you a historical piece of data. We're telling you your process in your life. We're telling you this is what's going to happen to you. This is the way how we become Jews. We become a Yid by starting off a certain way and fighting to internalize messages of our failures in order to transform into new types of people who then become capable of merging the beauty of Hashem's world through finding the Yoshev oil, the connection to Hashem that comes from going out of the world, within the world of, for example, business, within the world of shrewdness, knowing how to deal with loved ones, knowing how to deal with the Bria. That's the purpose. That's the message of Yiddishkeit. The message of Yehadus and of Yiddishkeit is in these parshas to teach us that what going on in Maisa Avois Simen Lebonim means exactly so. That if you read the depth of the stories of what they taught you in Cheder, they're teaching you what happened to you in Cheder, and what happened to you when you were a bacher, and what happened to you when you got married, and in your business, within and without. And that, my friends, is the parsha we should take with us today.